Welcome to tutorial number 1 of Fall and Dodge or Fall and Hit. This is the game that we are trying to recreate. So we have a bunch of tennis balls that are falling down in random locations, and we have to dodge them by being this dog who moves either left or right. Okay. If you wanted to code this to be a fall and catch game, you could code it so the dog has to catch all of the tennis balls. Either way, it's similar concept, but just the opposite in the way that everything is coded. I have 4 lives right now, and if I get hit by enough of these tennis balls, I'm going to get game over. All right, a lot of other elements and things we can add in as well, but this is where we are going. All right, for this tutorial, we're going to talk about making this backdrop, this bunny right here, and we want to be able to go left and right. And you can see the bunny changes directions and also has some kind of animations for movement as well. So the code does get a little bit confusing, but we'll do our best to explain it from a brand new project, which is going to be right here. Alright, so we'll get rid of the cat, and we will first put our backdrop up, which is going to be that night sky, I think it's called, Night City. The reason I use this one is because the bunny that we use, which we find here, is a very gray color, very light gray, and it shows up really well on that dark background. There's the hair right here. Don't get confused. I'm not using that one. I am using the rabbit, which is right here. Alright, we're going to bring the rabbit down in size to about 50, and we'll bring them down to the bottom here. Okay, so we know that the movement commands are going to be left and right, and we're going to use our arrow keys for that. So that will be a simple when our flag is checked. If I hit the right arrow key, move right, left arrow key, move left. So we'll say forever. If the right arrow key is pressed, we're going to want to change X by a positive value. Alright, which we're good with. And we'll do the same thing for when the left arrow keys. So we'll say the left arrow key, and we're going to change X by -10 instead of +10. Alright, let's see how that goes. Perfect. Right, so we're able to move right, able to move left. For your game, if you want to use 10 as an increment, you can. If you want it to be more, want it to be less, it's your game. You can choose for it to be whatever you want. Alright, now we have animations. When we look back at our example here we had before, we see we have 2 different costumes for when we move, but we actually have 4 different costumes because 2 of them are when the rabbit is pointed left, and 2 of them for when the rabbit is pointed to the right. Right, and we want those things to pop up for when we move left or when we move right where appropriate. So back in here, if we go into our costumes, these are the only 2 that I use, Rabbit A and Rabbit B. And you can see if we cycle back and forth between the 2 of them, it looks like the rabbit is running. I'm going to get rid of all these other ones just because we don't need them. If I ever want to restore them, you absolutely can, or if you want to use them a little bit differently than how I'm using these, you absolutely can, but here's the way I did it. So for Rabbit A, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to make this really simple and call it 1R. And I call it 1R because it's costume 1 and we're pointed to the right. This one here I'm going to call 2R because it's costume number 2 and it's also pointed to the right. I'm going to duplicate both of these. I'm going to group them both together, and instead of 1R2, I'm going to flip this thing so it's pointed to the left, and this will now be costume 1L, costume 1 pointed to the left. Alright, you probably see where I'm going with this one. Costume 2 pointed to the left. Alright, so back in our code, now that we have all of our costumes set up, we want to say when the right arrow key is pressed, and normally if we're hitting the right arrow key, it's going to be multiple times. We want this thing to be changing costumes and cycling around between those 2 right costumes when we're hitting the right arrow key, and same thing for when we're doing the left arrow key. So we're actually going to use an if-else statement because we can't use the next costume, because if we use next costume, that's going to cycle back and forth between rights and lefts, which we don't want to do when we're hitting the 1 arrow key. So here's how we're going to do it. Control if-else. And we're going to say that if we're on one of the right costumes, go to the other one, or otherwise go to the other one. Alright, so what that means is this. We're going to go into our operators, and we're going to get our equal sign. And underneath looks, we can say, so we'll say if our costume is the name, and we had this one going to be 1R. So if it is 1R, I want to change costume to 2R. Okay, and otherwise switch back to 1R. All right, and we'll see how that looks. All right, so when I hit the right arrow key, okay, I'm moving. Left hasn't been coded yet, but if I hit the right, I'm going to be moving, and if it is 1R, switch to 2R, and if not, go to 1R. So that's the way that we get it to cycle back and forth. So we're going to do the same thing for this right down here below. Rather than hunt for all those commands, I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to adjust it to make it work for our left arrow keys. So make sure we get this right. Instead of 1R, we want to be 1L, and then we're going to go to 2L, and the opposite for here. Instead of 1R, we're going to go 2R. Okay, that should be right. Let's see how that goes. All right, I did something wrong here. I did an L. 1L. There we go. Okay, there it is. We're in business, and we're looking much better now. All right, so now our rabbit is running either to the right or to the left. We can do that with this code based on here. This will apply to most any other sprite that's going to have this running motion. If you wanted to get a little more fancy in it, you could probably cycle back and forth between 3 costumes, but it's going to require you to nest some more if-else statements in here and figure out some of the logical coding on your own. This is how we cycle back and forth between the two, which makes the gameplay look a lot better than having just one character that's always facing the same direction. This gives it a little bit more life.